Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first disqualification show since our off-season or our postseason one here a couple of weeks ago. We're going to get the link here shared, and we're going to start that as we have no shortage of material to talk about that was crammed into however many laps that turned out to be in the Busch Clash today. And we will get started just shortly here. Boop. And hello. Welcome everybody that's joining in. I'm sure that even the people that picked Erik Jones to win the race today probably would not have predicted the particular chain of events that actually happened to lead to that today. But we will certainly talk about that as we get going here. Boop, link is shared. There it is. We are all good to go. There we go. Boop, 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 boop. Just a scratch. I love it. Oh my goodness. All right. Can everybody hear me okay? We're still shaking out. If you think the drivers today are shaking off a bit of rust, I'm doing the same over here. We'll make sure everything is good to go here. Welcome aboard. This is the disqualification show, the first one for an actual race here in the 2020 season. I am Brock Beard, founder and editor-in-chief of Nascar.info. We have our first article already slated for this evening here that will somehow piece apart Kyle Busch's small supporting role in the overall drama that turned out to be what happened today in the Busch Clash, with Kyle Busch being your last place finisher. So, my goodness. I'm still just kind of recovering from this, just like everybody else here. Let me get the actual results pulled up to start to untangle everything we're seeing from it. As I mentioned, Kyle Busch, your last place finisher in the beginning, it seemed, of the very surprising set of circumstances at the end of the race. I know restrictor plate racing does always lend itself to having large pileups and big wrecks and a lot of anger and pointed fingers and battered cars getting to victory lane. But this was very much the next extension of that. It was so much crazier this time around. Kyle Busch being involved in the first of these major pileups that happened over in turn 4. Battle between himself and Joey Logano went sideways, and I did have a feeling when they first showed that Monster Energy Cup paint scheme on his car. I didn't say anything at the time, but I was thinking, you know what, that is flying a little too close to the sun. I have a feeling I'm going to see this car wrecked before too much longer. But that turned out to be the case, and I certainly didn't anticipate that he was going to be last in the race. First time Kyle Busch has ever finished last in the Busch Clash. The first time that the number 18 has finished last in the Busch Clash. He now joins his brother, who finished last in the Clash in 2017. Now, what Kyle will be seeking to do next Sunday is join his brother Kurt, as well as Jeff Gordon in 1999, to be the third driver in the history of the race to finish last in the Clash and then recover to win the Daytona 500. Kyle still having not won the Daytona 500, having finished second to his teammate Denny Hamlin last year. So that, among many of the stories that are already developing for this next week, as the results have just now refreshed, still again showing Erik Jones as the winner, and everybody else that was not the top 6 falling out of the race because of accidents. Very, very interesting deal here. So, as I tweeted over to Pockrass earlier to see if they actually had post-race inspection for the Clash. I can see why that apparently they didn't do that. They did inspection last night, and I guess that's just, at least from the response that he gave, it seemed to indicate to me that they don't have an hour-and-a-half wait clock for us today. So today is going to be a little bit more of a flexible show here today, and just kind of talking get back into the rhythm for the 2020 season. And a lot of things we're already looking ahead to. So much has already happened today already. But certainly, first of all, have to talk a lot about the Clash there, and just what a complete mess that turned out to be. 18 cars in the field, one of the smallest we've seen in a number of years. Was originally going to be 20 cars. Of course, Daniel Suarez and Daniel Hemrick not having rides for the race. Suarez is going to run the 500 for the Gaunt brothers. Hemrick going to do a part-time schedule for JR Motorsports in the Xfinity Series. So we do not have either of them in the field. One would think, at least from the first part of the race, that was going to be a pretty clean race. very similar to what we've seen in the duels the last few years when they didn't have anything really of consequence to race for. That is until the tangle there at the end that pretty much threw out what was going to be a pretty interesting fuel mileage battle between the Chevys leading their draft and the Fords and the Toyotas catching up to them. They just started to kind of merge into them at the same time, and then very much had just a huge pile up there that seemed like it was at least going to relieve some of the tensions a little bit, but turned out to just be a preview of things to come. Then very similar to what we saw back in 2002, the Daytona 500, one of the many races that NASCAR has very graciously put up in its entirety on their channel, had a big pile up in the trioval for a late race restart. Something happened between Ryan Newman and William Byron, it looked like. Perhaps some fluid on the track or something just went sideways. Ended up eliminating a lot more cars than that. My goodness. You had the wreck with Chase Elliott and Denny Hamlin. And pointing out again, you think back to 1990 in the Daytona 500 and Dale Earnhardt blowing that right rear tire into the third corner and costing him the win to Derek Cope. The fact that Earnhardt actually saved that car when the tire literally exploded enough to damage the right rear corner of that car and still finished fifth in that race. Denny Hamlin, not quite as fortunate, although his day would not end with that moment. Him blowing a tire and getting collected with a number of other drivers there. But still getting back out on track somehow. I thought, look, he was going to be eliminated like Ryan Blaney and some of these other guys were. And then Chase Elliott seemed to be in the driver's seat, although he had damage in the right rear of his car after he slapped the outside wall. There was the tweet, I think the Gluck pointed out that the teams could work under the red flag. So certainly wondering over here at Nascar headquarters if they were going to be bringing allowing Chase to get out of the car and pull the fender off of a tire that perhaps was going to be falling apart there at the end. Ultimately, didn't come out of the car, pulled the car down pit road and got the tires changed, which was going to put him in the fifth spot. Turned out he ended up lining up in the third spot on the outside line because Eric Jones, his car was so damaged in the earlier accidents and also lost a lap during an overshot pit stall. It was the only car that was a lap down, running last for a lot of the race. He seemed to just have every kind of problem in the event. Gave away the third starting spot for Chase to have a chance at it. This ultimately allowed Chase to get up to the lead just in time to get wrecked by Kyle Larson in turn 3 and force another caution that would send us into double or triple overtime at that point. And then we had a situation with Ryan Newman looking like he was going to do something. Austin Dillon with the only car that had no damage seemed to put him in a very clear advantage to pull off a pretty easy victory. But the defeat was snatched from the jaws of victory there at the end. And you had Austin Dillon finding himself on the wrong side of that. Towards the end there, some fender rub for Newman, dropping him back, and Denny Hamlin pushing Eric Jones to the lead. Hamlin apparently setting himself up to a very similar two-car tandem situation where he could have slingshot Jones for the win, but of course Hamlin had lost two laps in the process of his accident, gained one of those back from a caution, and couldn't challenge Jones for the win. Ultimately pushed Jones to the victory with the hood practically flapping off of the car. So a crazy situation. I mean, I think you had a little bit for everybody involved there. Whether it was the people wanting a lot of clean green racing and a lot of side-by-side action. We certainly saw a lot of changes for last place during the race. Albarola's pit road infraction seemed to be the only incident that was going to bring anybody to the back of the field. And even then, he seemed to be able to climb his way back up when the field split in half. And then you had other situations for other drivers at the back of the field. Jimmy Johnson, Kurt Busch, all trading spots at the back. It looked like Eric Jones is going to have his second straight last place finish in the Clash. And then, of course, the last shall be first. He got himself back up there at exactly the right time. And people could split hairs as much as they want about how many cars were left and how many laps he actually led. But, hey, it worked out for him. And with all of his other teammates wrecked out of the race or just completely out of contention, he had the one that counted at the end of the day. So not sure how much you can really learn from this race going into next week. Not sure how much can really be said about the current super speedway package, other than the fact that these drivers are very much willing to run several laps as clean as possible. But when it gets down to the pay window opening, they're still going to run over each other and wreck and do that as much as they always have in the past. I think it's a little bit an overreaction to call this anything more serious than we've seen in years past. It's just really more of an exaggeration of what we've already seen. It's certainly not unusual to have drivers set themselves up, knowing that, you'd have a couple of small incidents, maybe some engine failures at the beginning of the race. And then when it gets to the end of the race, people got to set themselves up for the front, or running so far in the back, they want to get back up to the front, not having a chance to get up there. People get anxious, and they're going to get back up there. And when they do that, people zig where they should be zagging, and you get yourself some big pileups. Just so happened in this one, we just had a little bit more than usual. I wouldn't expect to see the same thing in the duels, and especially the 500 here. But, again, certainly been wrong before. Last year, of course, we had the big wreck that came before the rain shortened the race there, that ended up giving Jimmy Johnson a very surprising victory in that one. And then you went on to have a 500 with a lot of clean racing at the point where Matt DiBenedetto was lapping the field and weaving through three wide traffic. But then by the end of the race, DiBenedetto and a number of other drivers eliminated in some very big accidents that ultimately opened the door for Denny Hamlin to pull off the victory. So hard to really tell from one year to the next, from one aero package to the next, what we're going to be seeing. But certainly some tempers flaring. Brad Keselowski very not happy about the accident that he was involved in there. But I think in a race like this, where it seemed just as likely to run in last place as it was to win, with such a small field and so much at stake, even without points or anything like that being a factor, still had an interesting deal. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. Kudos also to Jeff Gordon for following through with his end of the challenge there after the Super Bowl last week there, that wearing the Kansas City Chiefs jersey there. I know Clint Boyer got a lot of good traction off that, and Boyer having a decent finish in spite of all the damage he suffered in the race. I think that Gordon and Boyer's dynamic, given its origins, or at least one of its key moments back in 2012 when they had that wreck at Phoenix and stuff, it's certainly come a long way since then. It's like seeing something between Richard Petty and David Pearson in the years after 76. I think that should be something entertaining that perhaps these broadcasts build off of in the years ahead. Also, really a good job for the booth there between Mike Joy and Jeff Gordon. I think they have a very good dynamic in there. Again, not to cast aspersions on Darrell Waltrip, but he was certainly a great broadcaster in there. But it may have been a situation of just too many cooks in the kitchen, and perhaps it could have just as easily been accomplished with any one of them being swapped out or replaced or put in the Charlotte studio or whatever. I found it very much easier to listen to the broadcast today. And even in the ARCA race, the ARCA race had a different group, but the Cup Series side of it here between this and practice, I think was a good step forward. I'll be interested to see how it is for the 500 and for the longer races coming up. Although with the clash ending up going as long as it did, I think we had a situation where it turned out to be much more, much longer race with much more chances for people to be settling into their roles in the booth there than we would have seen if it was just a normal 75 laps. But it's the super speedway racing. I mean, these are age-old debates. The same, actually, well, if we forgive the promotion here for the Patreon, the latest video that you guys have advanced access to just posted this morning was video I did with NASCAR Man, video I narrated for NASCAR Man on Speed Week's 1988, culminating in the 1988 Daytona 500. It's a really good video. I enjoyed watching it when it got posted there. It is available for Patreon members of all levels in my at the LASCAR Patreon, patreon.com/LASCAR on Brock. Any of you are able to watch that at any time. I don't know when the release date is for the video, so obviously NASCAR Man will have more updates on that, but it will be posted in the days ahead here, so you guys can see that on YouTube. We're still hard at work on other things we're working on for between himself and myself, those things for the website, getting we're stirring the website back awake from the off-season slumber and everything. So it's going to be an interesting deal in the weeks ahead here. We're doing the disqualification show today for the Busch Clash. We will not be doing one for the duels on Thursday. I have work that evening. But we will do one. I am planning on doing one for after Sunday's Daytona 500, and we'll stick ahead with our typical weekly schedule for future rounds here for the disqualification show. But definitely jumping into how the season started, and quite the start already with that. Let's see. Another deal to definitely talk about here with qualifying has already been locked up with the roof flap that may or may not have helped there on the number 47, and the sponsor that may or may not have helped in Kroger sponsoring pole day earlier this morning. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., the perennial super speedway challenger in his first ever attempt for JTG Daugherty Racing, has brought a Hendrick engine to the pole, and alongside him is, I drew a blank, Alex Bowman in the number 88, who we have seen be pole winner and contender in the years since he's driven for Hendrick Motorsports. Could be a very interesting front row for that up there as well today. And going to be, certainly going to be interesting in these weeks ahead. Very happy. I think the duels are going to be very interesting. I think the selection of drivers that we have that are contending for positions, although I would certainly like it if it were a lot more drivers. I think whether it would be more drivers in the top of the field, not being locked in, just going back to having to race into the top 14 to guarantee a spot, or just having more open drivers fill out the field and have an entry list of upwards of 50 or 60 drivers like we used to have. Ifs and buts. I mean, there's a lot of factors that have certainly not made that an advantage anymore. But I do think in spite of that, I mean, with 43 drivers for filling those final, or at least the 5 drivers in the back of the field filling those final 2 spots, there's some interesting drama playing out in that. So that should be good to see. But congratulations to Brendan Gaughan for locking himself in. Big props to Luis Torres for catching the footage there of him, Gaughan reacting on looking at the race view scanner there of being locked into the 500. That was a really cool moment for him. Gaughan has always given fantastic interviews. I haven't been fortunate enough to do one with him yet. But his storyline there, the 62 car, and looking to round out this season on the plate races has been, I think it's going to be a really cool thing to follow this season. And to know that he's going to be able to start that off in the Daytona 500 is fantastic for him. I think that's going to be a great storyline to watch in the days ahead. And then on the other side, talking about Justin Haley in the number 16 car. Now, Haley, after winning in the July race last year, runs the same paint scheme, but on a different team, of course. His Xfinity Series program, Colleague Racing, is going to make its Cup Series debut in the Daytona 500 as they lock themselves in as the fastest of the open drivers, or the new go or go home drivers in the field. And going to be very interesting to see what he can do in the race. I don't know. I haven't looked at the weather outlook yet for next week, but certainly if weather's in the area, that is going to be one driver that everybody's going to be watching for if they're still in a factor in the field, whether they're running 27th or in the top 10. Haley was very very quiet rather last year, talking with him over at the Colleague Racing hauler about his Cup plans for this year. And I can perhaps see why, that he was focusing on wrapping up the season there with the Xfinity Series program, and now ultimately working out this deal to have the colleagues, along with a partnership with Richard Childress, get the number 16 car into the field, and seeing the number 16 back in the Cup Series for the first time since we last saw Greg Biffle run a few years ago. Now under completely new ownership, completely new team and all that. That's going to be a thing to see. I've seen some comments on here about the deal with James Davison. I haven't heard anything new on that. Nothing new on the deal there for him to be running both the Daytona 500 and the Indy 500. Certainly looking like that's not going to happen now that he hasn't taken a qualifying lap today. With the new impound rules and everything, it reminds me a little bit of some of these teams that would be entered and then withdrawn, but the team wasn't even entered. So I guess that deal has fallen through. An unfortunate deal there. Still not seeing anything from the NY Racing team. J.G. Yaley driving a Ford for Rick Ware Racing kind of gave me flashbacks to that, given that he was going to be running a Ford Mustang for the number 7 team last year, had taken pictures over at NASCAR Media Day. But that's not there. Same thing with the Obico Racing as well. Not seeing anything new from those efforts. You would certainly hope that these other teams spring back up again and help fill the fields. It's going to be interesting going into Las Vegas. I was about to say Atlanta. Vegas next week, and some of these other races in the weeks ahead to see how many teams are actually committed to the full season and who they're actually going to have driving in these cars. But that's going to be interesting. Yep, Floyd Mayweather's team. That's another one. Thanks for bringing that up. MLG Pro Swag 69. There's other deals with that. So nothing new on that at the moment. but it's going to be interesting to see in the weeks ahead. But of course, we got to do speed weeks before we do all that. Michael Self, congratulations to him on the win in the ARCA race yesterday. We had, in addition to the practice sessions for the Cup Series to get the season started, last place finish. That is, we're gonna have a Nascar article coming up there from our ARCA correspondent William Saki, who will be talking about the number 88 car that finished at the back of the field there, and give some more updates on that. And I will have the Clash article up later tonight. So we'll have some more updates on that to get you guys your last place fix to start the season. We're going to do our entry list storylines update this Thursday. It's going to be focusing on the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series, because obviously our article last week is just focused on the Cup Series. Once we get the entry list for those two series, we'll do a full breakdown on that and talk about those series as they begin. Tons of storylines, as I mentioned on Twitter, and I wasn't the only one mentioning this, of course. Great to see a lot of these sponsors getting excited about being active in the sport again. It seems like we have a combination of what we had back in the early 2000s with these .com websites jumping on these Cup teams, Corey LaJoy and others, for example. Timmy Hill's team is another one that comes to mind. And then, having these teams being able to announce new sponsors, even if these sponsors are only for just a couple races, unfortunately, again, just like with the charter system, it's the new normal. It's unfortunate to have to move the goalposts back a little bit and say, oh, well, this is good, but I guess you gotta build it back up before it can get back to that point again, if it's ever possible to get back to full-time sponsorship again. But we'll certainly see as we come up to the 500 here and into the weeks after that. Pretty crazy situation. Still seeing the comments here, everybody just pretty much a disbelief about the Clash. I don't really have a whole lot to add to that. It was pretty stunning from those sets of circumstances here. It almost seems like I know there were people posting pictures in the ARCA garage about how beat up those cars were from everything yesterday. And Hailie Deegan's adventure there in the 4 car there, she seemed to be in the middle of most of those accidents there in the race, but good job on her getting that second place finish there, matching the other performances of other female drivers in the ARCA 200 over the years. She certainly seems to be advancing on a really good level there through the different circuits. I know it seems like it was just a very short time ago that she and her PR person were just kind of shopping her around through the media center to introduce her to everybody there. I mean, like just going from person to person and just working the room, saying, "Hey, here's Hailie Deegan. Do you have any questions for her?" And just going one person down the line. Very personable driver. A very, I'm very excited for what she could be doing going up ahead here. She seems really passionate about things in the sport, and I think they're advancing her at the right clip. So that'll be an interesting deal too, and hopefully that opens the doors and keeps things as competitive as possible for as many drivers in there as possible. So that's good to see on that. And a number of other ARCA drivers, William will, I'm sure we'll get more information on that for his ARCA piece there too. But again, a lot of great drivers there. I believe Willie Mullins getting a top 10 finish in that race as well. After the disaster that he had, I believe, in last season's race where he was wrecked at the very beginning. It was good to see him survive all that and work a owner driver or a smaller team rather up into the top 10. So that was a good deal on that. Mentioning Ross Chastain fan 10, just answering your question here. I just saw pop up. There will be articles on the duels. So I'll do articles on both those races. If it is Kyle Busch, it will be on that. We don't play favorites here at Nascar. If you finish last, we're going to write about you. If it's Chase Elliott for the rest of the season, we will write Chase Elliott articles for the rest of the season. But that's about the only situation where that would happen over at the website. So that's the deal. Yeah, the Clash article will be coming up tonight, and we'll get that up there. Busy day today. I don't know how many of you guys watch the Oscars and everything. I watch it for the comedy of it all because I think actors that are outside their element is just hilarious to watch. But from a Mystery Science Theater standpoint, that's going to be what we're going to get up there tonight. We'll get the article on the Clash going after the show here today, and get that all set up for you. Got a few other bits of information. It was definitely very interesting set of circumstances there. Definitely, I thought I was going to be writing an Eric Jones article given all the problems he was having. Excuse me. And so I have a lot of those notes already kind of drafted up. But now those would actually pretty much fit better into a winner's article, and we're doing something different for Kyle Busch. But that's the challenge of the last place beat, and that's one of the best things about it, quite honestly. You get a situation where you can have a driver that dominates all day, or you have a driver that's at the back of the field all day, and then they start clawing their way up, and you can talk about that, and then the feature ends up being somebody that maybe you just didn't see coming. Brad Keselowski, again, comes into this season with the longest streak without a last place finish in a Cup Series points race. How much longer will that continue? We've seen Daniel Suarez and Chase Elliott and these other drivers have their own streaks end in recent years. And if you go even further back, of course, even longer streaks with Casey Kane and Jimmy Johnson and Clint Boyer. Some of the longest ones we had when the site started have since ended. And Kevin Harvick, of course, being the peak of those. That's going to be an interesting deal. Spire Motorsports being mentioned as an open team. That was a bit of an oversight. I mean, I understand getting, kind of knocking the rust off there with the teams and everything. Perhaps they needed to put a better indicator on there on their graphics or something like that. It always feels like Spire Motorsports is an open team, but in fact, they are very much a creature of the charter system, with Furniture Row's charter, of course, last year, and now, of course, being a race winner from last year. It's coverage of the back of the field that's always a challenge. It would be nice if they, I know it's gonna be a challenge for Fox this year with the cuts that they've made in their budget. I think it's going to be even harder for them to get a lot of coverage there at the back of the field, that they're going to have to just put as much effort as they can into the storylines that a lot of people, are watching at the front of the field, which is why, if the seamless transition to this, which is why it's so important that we get as much support as we get over at Nascar.info from you guys for spreading the word about the website, spreading word about the YouTube channel, or anything that you guys are able to contribute over the Patreon. Every little bit goes a long way on that. And it's certainly something that we're looking to build. And we're already we're looking, fingers crossed, on Auto Club here in a couple weeks. We still are in final steps here on our credential application. Nothing confirmed on that yet. But that is where we're looking to start the season and get you guys some of that trackside coverage that I know that definitely enhances what we're able to provide over at the website. Also, more work on the on everything else going on with the videos with NASCAR Man and everything. So anything you guys do that spread the word about the website there has a huge help there. So it's been we made a lot of big steps last year. I'm very excited about what we have moving ahead for this year. Actually, Kyle Busch's last place finish. Let's look that up. I don't have that ready at the moment. Again, as I mentioned, he hasn't finished last in the Clash before, but I know in 2008 he finished last at Dover in the fall, and I don't remember if he's finished last since then. It's at least been that long. So he has finished last with Joe Gibbs. It may seem like he hasn't. Maybe it would just be contained to his time with Hendrick, but that's not the case. Let me get this here. Feels so nice to dust these statistics off again here. It's been a very busy off season. We're going to have more information on that coming up here. We've done a bit of spring cleaning. I apologize why the desk here is pretty cleaned off at the moment, but we're, spring cleaning and everything. So that's what we're doing here. Have some more updates on that coming up. Let's get through here. Kyle Busch. So many drivers with first J in their first name. Okay. Kyle Busch's last place finish was at Michigan in 2016. His second straight last place finish of the June race at Michigan. Yes. Okay. So it has been much more recent. Yeah. His most recent two last place finishes, June of 2015, June of 2016. Finished last with a crash after 52 laps, and then a engine failure after 52 laps. In these last two races at Michigan, did not finish last at Michigan this past June. Ended the streak right there. So kind of on the rare side, that's 6 total last place finishes for him in Cup Series points races, not including the last place finish in the Clash today. I believe he was also finished last in the, I think he finished last in the All-Star race before, if I remember correctly. Let's see. Yes, 2008, he finished last in the Clash after winning the pole, blew an engine after 50 laps. So a different deal with that. Okay. So that's going to be the article that's coming up a bit later tonight. Let's see. Wow, they still got highlights from like Phoenix here at the bottom of the NASCAR online page. It doesn't seem like it was quite that long ago. Let's see. Anything else on here? Certainly like the tribute at the beginning of the race there to John Andretti. Again, condolences certainly to his family and the Andretti family and fans. That's I never had the fortune of interviewing him before, but certainly a driver that grew up enjoying watching him out there. Whether he was, like I said, when he was like first in the preview guide alphabetically, or all the statistics talking about like how short he was compared to other drivers out there, and they used to do like different rankings back in that time period back there, and just how personable he was out there and everything. He was just a driver that even years after him last competing in the Cup Series, still having a presence in the sport. Again, one thing I mentioned was just how much he had developed Front Row Motorsports into what it is today. It was really back in 2009 when he joined on there to be their full season driver of the 34 car. Front Row Motorsports had never really done a full season effort to that point in the Cup Series. Andretti's experience was really what got them into those shows all that year. They had some start and park cars that were running at the same time that they were competing with Dave Blaney during our first NASCAR championship season. But Andretti was very much there in the background trying to get that car in the show. I believe it was 2008 that he had a race where they had very limited sponsorship, and they had to race really to the very last lap in the duels to get the 34 car in the show. And then by 2009, they were already able to kind of build the program up there with a lot of Bob Jenkins' other business partners. So I think there's a lot of different drivers out there that are, different competitors that, that are a big part of the sport, even though they maybe not have they're not the drivers with the most wins, the most championships or laps led or anything like that, but their effect is still felt in the sport. And Front Row Motorsports is certainly just one of the places that you see that. I know Petty Enterprises is running a decal for the two different stints that Andretti drove for him back in the 90s and early 2000s as well. We have for our magnet actually coming up for our expected trip to Fontana. We're going to put Andretti and his Check It for Andretti Foundation there on the side of that as well. Again, there's more information on that, the Patreon for anybody who joins that will have your name on there and enter into a drawing to win that after the trip is over on that one. Seeing a comment there, Van City Racing, favorite NASCAR driver. I really don't really have one these days. I know I'm wearing the William Byron throwback shirt, as I saw one of you guys point out there. The Jerry Nadeau is still my favorite driver from that time. I did a video on that last year, and also again, big thanks to Jerry there for the interview. Unfortunately, he didn't want the video he didn't want the video publicly available there after that. So that's why it got taken down on that. But we're still working out something on that. It's something that I think there's a potential of doing a face-to-face interview. I think that was the biggest thing. He said that he wanted to make sure that, he was saying the things that he was saying rather than me doing it. Although that was really the plan originally with the video, and he was cool. He liked the video. It's just a couple days later, he changed his mind on that. And it was like, well, okay. So we worked out a deal with that. So it's not publicly available, but it is, I still have it in the archives, but it's just not publicly available. So it's there for that whole deal there. But I think that, that was always my favorite driver from those times back then. Don't really have one right now. You can't really have one when you're in the media. So, especially even, following in last place, you have certainly drivers that you see a lot more often than others. We do a lot of stuff where we talk about Joe Nemechek or Jeff Green or drivers like that. I mean, those are certainly drivers that I certainly watch, and in the Cup Series, there's been a whole variety of drivers, Timmy Hill, Joey Gase, other competitors like that. JJ Yaley seems to be a driver I run into pretty much every race I go to. Actually, I think just about every race except for Mosport last year, I had an interview with JJ Yaley with that. He's always been really friendly and everything, and appreciative of what we do over at the website. Those are other competitors we always watch at the same time there. But again, really really like the tributes they did with Andretti and the lap around Indianapolis was a really nice touch. That was really well done, as expected. Tim Richmond, yeah, that's a good vote too. You'll be interested in Tim Richmond's going to play a role in this next video that NASCAR Man's going to be releasing, and that's in the Patreon right now. He's certainly a part of the story that develops in there. I saw a comment in here, somebody asking about, Ross Chastain, you were asking about the Rodney Orr. We did do a video on Orr as part of our Speed Weeks 1994 video that I did with NASCAR Man last year. In terms of a standalone video, we don't have one planned on that yet at the moment, but that's definitely a big part of that video. So you get a really good idea of him. And there's also, it's good you mentioned Rodney Orr also. There's I found a Facebook group last year, or over the offseason rather, that actually had some old news footage of interviews with him, and even shots of the 37 car on track before the accident. Nothing with the accident, of course, or anything like that. So no viewer discretion required on that. But some really good old footage of him and his Goodies Dash Series days and early parts of his career. So if you're ever interested in that, just look up Rodney Orr on Facebook. I should have the link actually available too. Let me see if I can find that, because that was, yeah. Let's see. Where did I have that? I have it bookmarked. Is it the photo page? What's that? No, not that one. Yeah, there was that somewhere. They had a it was, gosh, I had this prepared earlier. Yeah, like I say, it's pretty much anywhere you find it on Facebook. There had like a, let's see, I think it's this page here. Let me make sure. At least kind of screen this a little bit. So the one with the video, yeah. Yeah, I think this is like a fan page here that was pulled up here. I'll pull it up in this. This looks like it. Let's see, pictures. Gosh, this goes back. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah, there's a post on this page. I'm going to post the link here so you can see it. And here's the link to the Facebook group there. That link there's a post on July 20th, 2011, quite old here, but it actually has some footage of Orr's career. And there's also some other like news footage in there. So I'd highly recommend checking that out as well. I forwarded that over to NASCAR Man when I first saw it over the off season. So definitely check that out there. We got some really good information on that. So that's a different deal on that. Let's see here. Just checking some of your other comments here in the meantime. Yeah, the spin and win at Martinsville. I mean, that was always that was an amazing race. I remember that when that happened live. Because I remember that weekend. That was the same weekend Wayne Gretzky retired, and that same day Jerry Nadeau qualified really good for that race in the Cartoon Network car. I remember watching that coming back from school and seeing him start so well in the number 9 car. So that was a different deal back then. Let's see. Look at Tad Hugo's comment here. What's your feeling about car numbers being unretired in NASCAR? You know, I mean, I'm kind of middle ground on that. I know it's complicated in racing because unlike other sports, I mean, of course, you know, you would have like a football team or a basketball team or something like that, and they have players that have numbers, and then the number's retired, even though the number's owned by the team. They retire the number, showing respect for the player. It's a little more complicated where in NASCAR, because the number is so much more than just what's on the back of the guy's uniform. That it's the car. And the car is very much representative of the team, and I think it's a trickier deal with that. And the Childress one, of course, is I'm sure the one you're thinking of is always the example everybody goes back to. That you know, of course, the number 3 being Earnhardt's number, but of course not the only number he ever ran, just the number he was most prolific in. And the number was always very much representative of Richard Childress racing as a team, which of course still exists. You know, it was certainly something that, you know, Childress never planned on running another black paint scheme again, and likely didn't want to run the number 3 again. but did years later. And of course, we've seen both since then with Austin Dillon. I think that in racing as well, like the numbers are also the link to the past of the sport. Whereas I think in other sports like football or baseball or basketball or something, they're a little easier to overlook. I mean, they're a little bit more notorious from their absence. Like, okay, you're not going to have somebody else play Babe Ruth's number in on the Yankees or anything like that. It's a different deal. I think in racing though, it's almost more of a tribute to the other past drivers who've run them. I mean, even earlier today, I mean, somebody was just mentioning Eddie Bierschwal, and I was thinking, look, I mean, even other drivers that maybe weren't as big of a name in the sport, you still think back to that because their statistics are preserved under that number, and you can refer back to that. You can certainly do that in other sports as well, but I think the turnover rate is different in that sense, and the team, the fact of what the team represents as a NASCAR team versus a football team or a baseball team or a basketball team really all comes together and funnels together in that number. The numbers are more central, I think, in the brand identity than that. Which is why it's unfortunate that like when they brought the 8 back, they couldn't run like the DEI font, or something. They had to pick this kind of forgettable looking octagonal thing that has now already had 2 different drivers running it. It's an unfortunate deal. I think that, and that's the problem you see on the other side of it. I mean, sometimes the number kind of loses its identity a little bit over time. But we mentioned this earlier at the beginning of this about the number 16 car coming back. Certainly wasn't a number they were going to retire for Greg Biffle, but definitely felt different out there not having the number 16 there, and now seeing it under a completely different team, under completely different circumstances. Heck, actually, it's come up quite a few times. We talk about Billy Standridge run the 47 and seeing the 47 on the pole for Daytona. A number can conjure the memories of any number of different drivers from any number of different eras. And yeah, perhaps the best way to commemorate all of them is just to keep them out there. Richard Petty Motorsports or Petty Enterprises, as it was back then, tried to retire the 43, and they were going to have just run Rick Wilson in the 44 and just stick with it like that. But that only lasted 1 year. It would be an interesting. I don't know the full details on what took place there, but I'm sure either STP put the pressure on them or fans did or whatever it was, but they weren't happy with the 43 not being there. And so they brought it right back. And even though Wally Dallenbach had as difficult of a 1994 season as he did and was out of that car and then actually leading right back into John Andretti in one of his first stints with the Petties after that, you had that number out there, and regardless of performance, it's out there. And of course it's still out there now with Bubba Wallace. So, yeah, I think that's why that people are so evasive about retiring numbers, is because it's not the same thing in NASCAR as it is with stick and ball sports. I think that's just really the difference with that. Relate to the 16 more than Ted Musgrave over Kevin. Yeah, I'm with you there, Andrew. Yeah, that's another one. See, again, that's a great thing with the numbers. You can look at a number and you can point at it and say, okay, well, I remember when so-and-so ran. I mean, you have newer fans now that maybe just think of the 14 as Tony Stewart's number before Clint Boyer drove the car. But then, of course, Stewart picked that number because he was a big AJ Foyt fan, and AJ ran it back then. And then AJ probably picked it because of somebody else. And that's and I know that's across different disciplines, not just in NASCAR, but it's still very much the same kind of deal. So that's the fun thing. Yeah, Ted Musgrave. See, and then that's a great thing when you see a number and you think about a driver, you think about that driver, and you think about certain moments. Gosh, wasn't Ted Musgrave the last pole sitter at North Wilkesboro in 1996? I think he was. So like different moments. I know Ricky Rudd was the last pole sitter at Riverside. And it was weird driving through where that used to be because there's just nothing left of that. It's unfortunate. But different. Oh, yeah, Sterling Marlin. See, there you go. There's another one, 8206. There you go. So yeah, I mean, this is really the fun deal of all that, and that's what you see out there. I mean, heck, I mean, even going back to talking about it, Rodney Orr. I mean, it's good to see the 37 still out there. It seemed like that had been a very rarely used one over the years. It was actually one of the starting park numbers for Front Row Motorsports for 2009. And now, of course, it's the second car at JTG with Ryan Preece now taking over after lateral move there with Ricky Stenhouse. But yeah, different deal with that. Let's see. Gosh. Let's see here. I guess Haley will drive for Colleague in the All-Star race. I don't know about that. I tried floating that with Haley back at Phoenix last year. He did not even want to touch it. He was very determined to just focus on his Busch Series efforts. And this was when I spoke to him was before the Xfinity Series race, of course, because the Xfinity hauler was there. But yeah, he did not want to talk anything about the Cup Series deal there or anything. So I had no indication of them doing this whole deal with Colleague, this year. But I believe that it would be very likely that they're going to run that car again there at the All-Star race. I think that seems pretty likely. So different deal with that. Let's see here. Sean Corr got a 4th place finish repping Orange County, New York. There we go. Yeah, another good run for him. I believe Corr got last in the ARCA 200 not too long ago, so that was a different thing. Let's see. Yeah, very surprised by Daniel Suarez not getting more speed out there in qualifying. I thought they for sure were going to be one of the top 2 guys, and that troubled me for Brendan Gaughan because I was pretty sure that Justin Haley was going to be the other guy getting in there. I fully expected Suarez to be locked in on speed. The Colleague team, they're no slouch. I know that Toyota has different gradations of what the top teams are. There's Gibbs and basically everybody else. The Levine family team certainly helped their efforts by sidling up with Gibbs last year. But yeah, different deal. Should we vote on who's going to come in last for Daytona? Well, certainly, yeah. Any you guys have preliminary picks for last place finishers of the Daytona 500? That's going to be, I'd say, given what we saw today, where Kyle Busch was leading and then wrecked and finished last, and Eric Jones, who was last for most of the race, won the race. Again, there's no telling whether that's going to be the deal there for the 500 or not, but that's going to be one to see. But yeah, that's right. Yeah. Front Row Motorsports went full distance in 2010. Yeah. But 2009, they had the 37 as a starting part. But 2010, they tried the whole deal with extends and Kevin Conway, and that whole season just weird, that whole deal. Quinn Houff is your potential last place finisher. I mean, you never know. I certainly hope they do better. I know that they're doing the whole tribute there with Derek Cope and the Purelator deal on the hood of the car. I think that's a really cool deal. I know that they're a little behind the 8 ball by running a 2019 Chevy nose, given that was a big problem, but they weren't that bad in qualifying. They actually did. I mean, there were other teams that were struggling quite a bit more than them. I believe wasn't Chad Fincham the slowest guy in qualifying? I believe for the 49 car. That's how it shook out there. Fincham, I'd like to see things turn around for him. Given his challenges there and working up the ranks there. I know Motorsports Business Management has gone through a bit of a realignment. Last report I heard, it sounded like they're just going to run the 2 Xfinity cars instead of the 4, and then focusing more on getting those Cup Series teams up to date, which is weird because last year they were doing like exactly the opposite, scaling back on the Cup Series thing and then pushing the Xfinity deal like full force. We'll see what happens on that end. Just getting the qualifying results right here. Okay, no, BJ McLeod didn't take a lap. Okay, so that's a different deal. So Joey Gase was the slowest one, and Chad Fincham third from the bottom in the 49 car. But Gase and McLeod both locked in chartered cars. So those for Rick Ware. So Fincham is the slowest of the not locked in drivers. It's too bad Brennan Poole couldn't pick it up either there too. But of course, Premium Motorsports, you never know what's going to happen with those guys there. Obviously, the 15 team did very well in this race last year, finishing top 10 the 500 with Chastain. Chastain 28th ranked in a Chip Ganassi supported Spire Motorsports entry there. So that's a good deal on that end. Let's see. I believe they said Reed Sorensen and Timmy Hill are the ones that can still lock themselves in on speed, depending on how things shake out in the duels. So we'll see what happens with them. Sorensen in the plain blue, number 27, the second Premium Motorsports machine, the team that finished last in the 500 last year with Casey Mears. Different deal for them. Timmy Hill running a Ford just for Daytona, going to run Toyota the rest of this year with Motorsports Business Management. Yeah. Okay. So Quinn Houff is ranked 38th. That shows here. He looks like he's 4th from the bottom among the chartered teams and 6th from the bottom among all the teams combined with the the open team. So yeah, not the worst spot there. And of course, they're locked in with their charter that they secured, I believe, from Childress. Was it? I believe that was the deal there. So many of these things have changed hands, but I think that's a different deal there. Think Chastain to win the duel? I mean, yeah, you never know. It could be a different situation there. Do I have a podcast by chance? Not at the moment. I've been on a number of different podcasts. I haven't really thought of doing one at the moment. I think I need. I've kind of done this in place of that, really, here with a disqualification show, because you just have me here. I think just listen to me talk on a podcast probably isn't. Well, I don't know. Maybe it'll work, but I don't know. You can always plug this in your car if you ever miss a show here and plug that in and see if that works out for you. But that's a whole different deal. First NASCAR memory I see here. First memory for that was Rick Mast flipping his car upside down at Talladega in 1991. That's the earliest thing I remember. And that was the first diecast I looked to pick up, was that one car. And so that really started a couple things at once back then. I always liked the way that Skull car looked. And I always like listening to the Mast cast. Talking about podcasts, I hope that comes back, because I think that he and Ricky did a great job on that, and they play off each other really well. Yeah, one of the Ware cars, I think Joey Gase's cars under Petty Ware Racing. That's because they have the charter from, I believe it was either Brian Scott's 44 car or the charter from the 43, and then Bubba Wallace got a charter from somebody else. So technically, it's the Petties are involved in it, but it's still a Rick Ware team. That's my understanding of that whole situation. So that's just the name's on there just because of the charter. I mean, you could make the same argument about Childress being part of Starcom for that, but I mean, they're not really getting Childress, well, Childress isn't really like the foundation of their team or anything. It's not like it's worked out of the same shop as the 8 or all that, because they have their own team. So I think it's a different deal there. Let's see. I think Chastain stays in the 77. I get the feeling that's just for Daytona. I'm not 100%. That's a different. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. It could very well. I mean, Spire Motorsports, given their performance last year and how they seem to just have a nucleus of certain drivers that were driving the car, they could just be switching drivers, and they could have somebody completely different in there for Vegas, much like they had in Atlanta last year. Yeah, I could probably see Chastain end up driving some races in the 27, or even, he's not going to run the 15 because Brendan Poole's full time in the 15. So, it could be a deal. I haven't heard anything about Chastain doing the full time in the 77, at least on my end. I think it'd be a good deal if they could work out some sponsorship there, but otherwise they probably are going to put in pay drivers, I would imagine, or somebody that can bring a sponsorship in, like what Chastain was able to work out with Ganassi and getting that whole deal there for Daytona. Obviously it wouldn't be Quinn Houff now that he's over at Starcom. So that's one driver from Spire's lineup that's out. And now, unless Justin Haley does anything, but it looks like if Colleague Racing is going to run Cup cars with Childress support, then that's probably out of the equation. So already that kind of cuts down Spire's driver lineup quite a bit. I think we could see something very different. Are they going to bring anybody else new in that has sponsors? It seems like a lot of those guys got grabbed up by other teams. If you have John Hunter Nemechek getting the full-time ride for Front Row Motorsports, great job for him. I hate it for Matt Tifft, because Matt's a really good kid. Enjoyed talking to him a couple times last year, but unfortunately, I'm certainly hoping that he's recovering well. I know he had a very difficult offseason in addition to what happened to him at Martinsville. But another of these competitors that, they can pop up at any time. There's always a possibility that these guys get competitive again and get back into the car. And we've seen drivers come back from even further back and even longer times out of the sport. So a different deal there. I'm just checking your comments here again. Seeing anything else? Yeah, really. Gaunt and Suarez. I mean, it's gonna be tough. I mean, I'm glad they have some sponsorship together. So it's literally not just Toyota backing. I know that was a big issue last year. I know Kligerman was working to just do the best he could with what limited resources they had at the time. But it looks like Coca-Cola and this telecommunications company that jumped on board there, they're at least putting enough in there to put their logo on the side of the hauler, and that's usually a pretty good indication they're going to get some kind of backing from there. But that would be a good deal from there. Let's see. I really mentioned that, yeah, I'm really pleased with what NASCAR has done over the offseason, posting a lot of these old races. That's something that they should have been doing a long time ago. And that's something these networks really need to jump on board for when they have these rain delays, is instead of showing these highlight shows with forced sound effects and stuff, they should show old races and show them decidedly older so everybody knows when they turn on that, oh, so Jimmy Johnson doesn't get a bunch of confusing tweets about winning the 500 in 2013. Like, okay, let's show something from like the 90s or the 80s. I mean, gosh, even watching the 2003 Daytona 500, it feels so much older than it did when I was in college. But it's just a whole different sport now. I mean, a whole different look. It was great seeing Jerry Nadeau back in a car and getting mentioned again. It allows you to kind of put yourself back in that time period. Even though that was a race that was rain shortened, they still had a good, interesting couple of moments there. But it makes a good, quick watch. Joe Nemechek running a 77. It's possible. I mean, anything's possible at this moment. But yeah. But yeah, it seems like they have a good partnership with Haley. I don't know the nature of it. I mean, it could be another one of those. I mean, the sponsorship thing has always been a little bit of a little hard to predict because you have some sponsors that are partners with the team. Like we mentioned Front Row in 2009 and how they had Taco Bell and Long John Silver's franchises and those showed up. You think about BK Racing and how they had to even get permission to put Burger King logos on it because they're owned by franchisees rather than Burger King itself. There's a lot that they still ran BK Racing as their logo even well after Burger King left as a sponsor. It's a weird deal. I'm not going to pretend to know all the little details on it, but do have definitely an interest in it because I think that the team part is kind of the canary in the coal mine when it comes to the overall health of the sport and how many teams show up. I'm excited that Fontana is so early in the season that potentially you still get a little bit of that Daytona after effect. So maybe if somebody has a good run at Daytona, they're able to fund the first couple of races. That perhaps they could come back out here west and make it through as much of the West Coast swing as possible. I hope we don't see a big drop off versus. It's concerning because we had Atlanta as the second race of the season, even though that was a terrible time of the year to do it because it was always rainy except for last year. You had a situation where it's at least somewhat close to Daytona, and they could stop there on the way back to Charlotte and run that race before coming out west. But it still seemed like you had a big drop off where you had like a 36 car field or 37 cars. I hope we don't see that for Vegas and Fontana and Phoenix in the West Coast swing there. I think that's going to be a little bit more jarring than Atlanta for sure. But if we have anything more than, I mean, I hate to keep, again, moving the goalposts back, but if we have some open cars at Fontana or Vegas, I think that'd be fantastic. I think that'd be a good, some sign of progress this year. I mean, in best case scenario, you have qualifying be interesting every week, but it's just not the norm anymore, and it's disappointing. But that's that whole different deal there. Yeah, I mean, it's been a drop off, and it's unfortunate because I mean, there's a lot of these tracks that are out here on the West Coast that you can run a similar setup to something that's on the East Coast. I mean, you can run a car at Fontana and Vegas, and it's not going to be too different from one another. In the aerodynamics and all that, and they can bring it back east and run it at Michigan or something. I mean, obviously, I'm thinking from a small team perspective. Of course, for a big team, they have like 40, 50 cars, and they can run like they have one that's probably specifically set up for Michigan and specifically set up for Las Vegas, and there's completely little things that would mean that there's no way in heck they could run the other car because it's just going to mess everything up. But yeah, who knows? You hope things can then turn around. If we have more than 40 cars for Vegas and Fontana, that'd be fantastic. But if we have only 43 for Daytona, that doesn't augur well. I think we'll probably think at best we'll have 40 cars for those. But I hope I'm wrong. I'm wrong about things like that, and I hope I'm wrong about that. So that'll be the deal going ahead. Let's see here. There you go. All right. So that's about all I have for right now. If you guys have any other questions of something we haven't talked about so far, definitely drop it in the chat. In the meantime, excuse me. Allergy season's coming in early. I apologize for that. In the meantime, we'll do a little bit of trivia here on a little Trivial Pursuit thing. Same deal as last year. Anybody you want to post in an answer, go ahead and jump on in. Anything else we haven't talked about or anything so far, we'll make sure that we do that as well. And again, before I do that, let me again post a big thank you to our members of Nascar.info Patreon, patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. Our current members: Brother Flounder, Dan Bear, Jeff Brown, Calvin Ingleston, the NASCARNumbersite.org, Blaze Zebratar, Worthless Pieces of F Incorporated, Jay Hess, Matthew Kolopoulos, Justin Brookover, Gail Delaney, Matthew Miller, Spencer P. Stillwell, Luis Torres, Andrew Hayes, Walter Reed, Adam Diamond, Benjamin Schneider, and Michael Lester Harvey. Thank you to all of you. And again, for more information, you know where you can find that as well. So let's go ahead and jump into trivia here, and we'll do a couple of questions. Oh gosh, it still has the answer from last November. Or I guess we did this did we do this in January? I don't even remember. I think we wrapped it up a little earlier then. Glenn Wood is the last answer I have on here. So I think that was a different deal. So yes, thank you everyone to our patron supporters. And again, we have more information on that, including how, oh gosh, tell me I have it here. Including all of our current patrons get one of these little stickers right here, saluting you as a patron member for 2020. We're looking to make this a yearly deal with our little car pulling behind the wall. So, boop, boop, boop. Thoughts on moving Sonoma this weekend, the future, the 500, same weekend, running Sonoma when it's green and not drab? Well, hey, I can tell you this. It is no exaggeration from what others have posted that Sonoma looks absolutely beautiful before the summer. It is very lush up there, and it's February right now. I don't know if you can see it outside. It's too dark in here, but it is. Oh, you can't see. It doesn't show on camera very well. But look, it's so bright on there because it's really nice outside right now. I'll tell you that in February. If they ran this race this weekend, I don't think it would be a problem. We do tend to get a lot of rain in the Bay Area here most of the time, but it is usually, yeah. I think by March it's usually not too bad. No two winters are the same. Last winter we had just a ton of rain, especially over the holidays, and then it didn't really taper down for a bit. But yeah, of course, you mentioned rain tires, so there's always an issue there. That would be quite the adventure. Given that it's the same deal there at the beginning of the year, but it's also Sears Point tends to be like the closest that NASCAR gets to rally racing with running up and downhill and all that. But it would be an interesting deal. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes with that, but it would certainly be something I'd be open to. I mean, heck, anything that makes it even shorter of a time to wait for that race weekend would be pretty exciting. Yeah, I mean, January's a little touch and go. You still get a little bit of the offset from the weather there. I don't think they're looking to extend the schedule that early into the year, but February is not too bad. And then March it kind of gets a little bit better, so that would be kind of nice. Actually, the other thing we got to talk about, it's easy. Sears Point actually did technically have a rain race for the Cup Series in 2013. They should not have gone green when they did, because it was actually, I was sitting in the stands that year. That was last year before I started doing the media center. And it was enough to actually get your clothes wet. Like it was raining enough to that point. It wasn't just like a drizzle that like, oh, is it raining? Like, no, it would be enough to actually trigger your wiper blades, and they threw the green flag. Now, whether or not that had a role in Paulie Haraka running in the back of Alex Kennedy on pit road, I can't really speculate on that, but it did, and it did lend itself to having a pretty crazy start of the year. That would have been that's one where I wish I would have actually been on pit road or in the garage area to cover that, because so much crazy stuff happened. You had that incident on pit road. You had Jacques Villeneuve's car break down and was on pit road for the start. And then Bobby Labonte blew an engine and they had to park the car in the carousel. Just absolute madhouse there for the start of the race. Would have made, we were able to cover that pretty well from the stands, but that makes a big difference there in the media side. I always try to take full advantage of that. But yeah, it was absolutely raining. It didn't start really letting up until about a lap or two into the race. So that was pretty hairy. I was surprised they didn't have an accident to cap all that off with everything else, but very unusual to have a lot of clouds in June in Sonoma, because it could be very, as you guys see, it looks dusty and kind of bleached and bleak out there. It's not as bad as it looks. I mean, if you actually get out there, especially in the morning, Gosh, it's really it's lovely out here, and it's definitely a venue I recommend to anybody out there. And heck, people at ESPN still fight each other just to get seats in the media center for that one. So it's definitely a privilege to be able to cover the event as well. And we definitely look to take as much advantage as possible. But it's a different deal on that. Let's see. But yeah, that was a good race. Yeah, 2013 was a pretty crazy deal on that. But I mean, they could potentially move us into something earlier in the year. I'd be okay. I wasn't close enough to see the Kennedy and Haraka wreck. I do have some pictures. I think they were on the article from 2013 that I put in there. I saw him come up the hill right when the field rolled off, and I was reacting. I was like, "Hey, wait a minute, that car doesn't look right." Even though it was a black paint scheme, so it kind of hid the damage a little bit. It definitely didn't look right. And my brother was actually listening to the radio, and it was I believe it was Alex Kennedy's radio, and they were saying like, "Hey, what the heck was that?" And it's like, "Don't worry." The spotter said, "Don't worry about it. You're going to see a lot more of that." So I'm calming him down. So he had the presence of mind to listen to that there at the time. But yeah, that's an yeah. I didn't see the wreck itself. I wasn't when you're in. I was sitting in turn 2, and when you look down from turn 2, it's just like it is on camera. You can't see the cars until basically they're halfway through turn 1, so you can't see pit road at all or the start finish line. But you can see pretty much everything else of the track from there, which is why I usually recommend those seats. Turn 7 is also a good one. I think Lasbro's been sitting in that corner here more lately. Those are really good seats out there because then you get a perfect view of the S's. And you can actually see the start finish line, even though it's pretty far in the distance, and a little bit of turn 11. Turn 11 is actually the hardest part of the track to see when you're at the track, unless you're actually in the there's a little sponsor village, I think for Save Mart, because they're the main title sponsor. They always get that spot, and that's like the best view. The second best view would be in the media center itself, because even pit road, it's a little hard to see. When Tony Stewart beat Denny Hamlin there, I think it was a little tricky for people to decipher what was actually happening. But yeah, I like that they have the thing. Where I was there when Robbie Gordon wouldn't let Kevin Harvick go. Yep, 2001. I was in the start finish line stands where they used to be, which is on the other side of the. I apologize for those of you waiting for trivia, but we'll balance both here. I was on the main straightaway stands, which were on the opposite side of the track from where they are now. It's actually where the merch haulers are now. And that used to be a lot better because you could hear the cars coming up from behind you and then see them come up in front of you again. And I swear, when they're coming, now that was a time when you could see turn 11 plain as day. Those were the best seats. But you could see them come right at you. And it was the coolest thing because if you were high enough up, yeah, it's like they were like right in your lap. They would come right at you. And the barriers that Casey King ran into a few years ago weren't there. So you could literally throw your car into the start finish line and then back up into turn 1. So you were hauling the mail getting up into turn 2. It's really it's hidden now how much slower that portion of the track is now because they've separated off not only the runoff in turn 1, but they've separated off the barrier between the drag strips and the front stretch, and they made the front stretch a lot narrower. They really need to widen that out again because that would really pick up speeds and really show this kind of crazy deal there. That was a good deal. But yeah, I was there for just to cover the bases. Yeah. First race I went out there to Sonoma was 1992. I posted some pictures from that on there. And I've been to every race, every Cup Series race at Sears Point since then, except for 1993, 1994, 2004, 2005. And I think that's it. Yeah, I think that's it ever since then. So yeah, so pretty much all those. Just about anything that's crazy that's happened at Sears Point, I've seen, except for Jeff Bodine winning. But I've seen plenty of Jeff Gordon wins, and that was pretty much the basis there. But definitely checking that out. Oh gosh, you're talking about the 44 car. If any questions on the Jerry Nadeau deal and the Georgia Pacific car conking out, check out my Jerry Nadeau. Why Jerry Nadeau was awesome video. It's definitely in there. Here, let me jump into the trivia because I know some guys are waiting for that. We'll start with the categories here. What category would you guys like to start off with here? We'll go ahead and we'll review this again. It's again the Trivial Pursuit deal. Whichever category gets the best here. First category is NASCAR. Second one is pits. Third one, teams, tracks, drivers, or the wild card. So think of this as Jeopardy. You don't have to answer in the form of a question, but just which category you'd like. Again, NASCAR, Pits, teams, tracks, drivers, or the wild card. Okay, we got one for tracks, we got one for drivers. Any other votes for which category we go with? Whichever one gets the most votes, we'll go ahead and do that. We'll wait for this along the way. Yeah, no, definitely the yeah, Hamlin Stewart's finish wouldn't have happened without the carousel. That's true. That's a valid point. I mean, it's a different deal there, but yeah. And it's a different, yeah, and I get the fact that the barriers are there. I mean, Beast of Metal, I see your comment there. I mean, it is a true point there that, you know, maybe they slowed him down for a reason, but given the fact that Sears Point is, you know, not had the same, I mean, usually it would take a serious accident from doing. Maybe they're being proactive in that stance, but you know, it's easy to forget how serious of an accident Casey Kane had in that first turn. I mean, that accident wouldn't have happened in the same way if it weren't for those barriers there. Now, would it have been better if he ran into, you know, a dirt hill? Probably not. But if he ran into some tires, okay, they would have had to clean up some tires that got scattered around. But, you know, that's happened countless times there at that track. You know, it's a tricky deal. I don't know why they did it that way, but that's just kind of how that worked out. Okay, let's see. I see 3 votes for drivers. I see 2 for tracks and 1 for wild card. So we'll do drivers here and start that. Okay. All righty, here we go. First question. What 90s year did Ward Burton begin racing in the NASCAR Busch Series? What year in the 90s did Ward Burton begin racing in the NASCAR Busch Series? Don't look at Racing Reference. Just go ahead and type in your guess. Type in your guess on here. What year in the 90s did Ward Burton begin racing in the NASCAR Busch Series? We have one guess for 93, 91, 91. We got other guesses. 90. All right. Keep putting the guesses in there. 90, 91. All right. Okay. We got a good amount of guesses here. The answer is 1990. Beast of Metal, you got it, man. 1990 is the year. All right. Okay. Now, here we go. Next question. Who drove the number 97 Pontiac in Who drove the number 97 Pontiac in 1997? Live TV, folks. The number 97 Pontiac in 1997. Who is the driver of that car? Now, I assume it means Cup. It does not say one way or the other. Can you see? We got the new lights in here. You can probably see that on the screen a little better than we did last year. But it does say just that. There's one page question. Chad Little, you got it, man. Yeah, like I said, good job, Beast of Metal. Who drove the number 97 Pontiac in 1997? We got Chad Little. We got Chad Littles all over the board, and the answer is Chad Little. You got it. You got it. I don't even know if the 97 was a Pontiac in the Busch Series. I guess that would have been the giveaway. All right, next driver question. How many years separated Terry Labonte's first 2 championship titles? How many years separated Terry Labonte's first 2 championship titles? How many years? 12 years. Any other guesses on that? How many years separated Terry Labonte's first 2 championship titles? We have number 12, number 1 for 12, we have 1 for 13, and the answer is indeed 12. You guys got it. 12 years correct. 1984 to 1996. All right. Ooh, here we go. Here we go. This is a good one for the race coming up this next Saturday. What driver won the first NASCAR Busch Series race at Daytona in 1982? What driver won the first NASCAR Busch Series race at Daytona in 1982? All right. Which driver won the first NASCAR Busch Series race at Daytona in 1982? We got Dale Earnhardt. Dale, okay, always a safe bet. Yeah, I'd have to agree. What driver won the first NASCAR Busch Series race at Daytona in 1982? Tommy Ellis, Dale Sr., Ernie Irvan, Darrell Waltrip. Answer coming up is Dale Earnhardt. Dale Earnhardt indeed. The early votes got it. Don't need to count. Well, I was going to make an Iowa caucus joke, but I can't think of one. Okay. How did Ned Jarrett suggest? Wait, sorry. Spoke too soon. Who did Ned Jarrett suggest was the best speedway racer of them all back then? Who did Ned Jarrett suggest was the best speedway racer of them all back then? The best speedway racer of them all back then, according to gentleman Ned Jarrett. This is a good. I honestly don't know this one. Richard Petty, Fireball Roberts. Who did Ned Jarrett suggest was the best speedway racer of them all back then? That's a quote, a direct quote. It said, quote, the best speedway racer of them all back then. David Pearson, Glenn Roberts, Richard Petty, Fireball. These are all good yeses. These are all very good yeses. Okay, let's see what the answer is. The answer is Fireball Roberts. 8206. You're the first. Oh, no. MLG Pro Swag. You got it. You just edged him there. There we go. Good on you. There we go. Justin Haley. Yeah, there we go. You saw into the future. Alrighty. Okay, here we go. Here we go. How many Winston Cup races did Richard Childress win in his 285 starts as a driver? How many Winston Cup races did Richard Childress win in his 285 starts as a driver? How many? I'm seeing some goose eggs come up. How many Winston Cup races did Richard Childress win in his 285 starts as a driver? One just to be different, 3 for Dale. And the answer is indeed 0, none. He did not win any races. Stepped out of the car to put Dale Earnhardt in, then Ricky Rudd, and then Dale Earnhardt again, and the rest is history. All right. How many Indianapolis 500 races did Bobby Allison compete in? Here's your David Land question of the day. How many Indianapolis 500 races did Bobby Allison compete in? How many? Whoop, hang on. Come on, mouse. Wrong screen. There we go. There we go. All right. Okay, we got other numbers. We got crooked numbers this time. 2s and 1s and 4s and 3s. And the answer is 2. There we go. 2s have it. The answer is number 2. Oh, come on, computer. Don't do this. Don't do this. But, okay, let's make sure we're still good here. Okay. There we go. There we go. All right. Next one. All right. Well, nope, don't give me the same question. Give me a different one. Okay. Which Allison was the 1967 NASCAR Winston Cup Rookie of the Year? Which of the Allisons was the 1967 NASCAR Winston Cup Rookie of the Year? We have one guess for Donnie. Do we have any other guesses for anybody? Which Allison was the 1967 NASCAR Winston Cup Rookie of the Year? We got guesses for Donnie and for Bobby and for Donnie. Okay, which one is it going to be? The answer is Donnie. Donnie, MLG Pro Swag, you got it again, man. I think you're a ringer out there. All right. Let's do a couple more here. Okay. Who was the first NASCAR Winston Cup champion to hold a college degree? Who was the first NASCAR Winston Cup champion to hold a college degree? First one to hold a college degree in NASCAR Winston Cup competition. Alan Kowicki, Bill Rexford. Any other guesses on there? First NASCAR Winston Cup champion to hold a college degree. Joe Weatherly. All right. Answer coming up. And the answer is indeed Alan Kowicki, Special K. There we go. All right, we're gonna do one more question here. We'll probably wrap it up here, and we'll do this. What driver? Oh, is it good? Okay, this is a good one. This feels like a good one here to wrap up. What driver rear-ended a police car while driving to Daytona in 1989? Oh, hell, this is perfect. Oh, this is perfect. I really don't know this one. What driver rear-ended a police car while driving to Daytona in 1989? My goodness. This is fun. This is a fun one. I love this little thing. Oh my goodness. What driver rear-ended a police car while driving to Daytona in 1989? DW? Darrell Waltrip got to be. It sounds like something he'd do, doesn't it? We're getting only guesses for Darrell Waltrip. I guess this is real obvious. I really don't. I've never heard this. If I have, I've forgotten it already. All right, Dick Trickle, Corey LaJoy. Okay, we're getting funny guesses now. So we're gonna go ahead and get to the answer. The answer is Davey Allison. Yeah, didn't see that one coming, huh? Boop. Davey Allison is the answer. Never heard that one before. Oh my goodness. Davey Allison rear-ended a police car while driving to Daytona in 1989. It says driving to Daytona. I guess not the 500. Maybe it was the 400 that he won that year. Yeah. Learn something new every day. I'll tell you what. I know I did. I'll tell you that. Well, okay. Well, tell you what. Well, folks, I think that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Disqualification Show. I'm not going to be able to top that one. So make sure you drive safe out there, folks. Goodness me. Okay. All right. Well, thanks again for tuning in, everyone, for the Disqualification Show. Next week, we're going to be doing one for the Daytona 500. We'll sum up the action from the duels, the Truck Series race, the Xfinity race, and we'll do all that for that show there. That'll be our 1-year anniversary of starting the Disqualification Show. So look forward to that. I'm sure we'll have no doubt, if today was any indication, we'll have no shortage of storylines to talk about for that one. We'll do full coverage of the event there and find out who is your new Daytona 500 champ, and more importantly, who is your last place finisher of Daytona 500 to follow things up. So again, big thanks to everybody else here, and for following along. And check out the website later tonight for our feature on Kyle Busch's last place finish today in the the Busch Clash. William Saki's article later this week, as well as our entry list storylines and articles for the duels. It's going to be a very busy week and very excited to get started. So thank you all for joining on board, and we will see you next time.